Hello everyone, Turner Burner here with another video for you guys. I'm going to go over, this is going to be a solo explanation. I haven't done this in quite some time, um, partially because I haven't done any escape solos in a while. But the escape solo I'm going to go over is Nomad on the End. Already did a solo explanation for the channel trailer, but I never did a solo explanation for the Pouncer spawn. And then when I did the Pouncer spawn, Great Defensor did it like I can't even say a little bit differently, but really differently in in his own style and his own gameplay. And just for a point of order, he's the only one to solo Nomad on the end without a Lancer, and he's also the only one to solo without the skill card Menace. And I'll go over all that in this video. Um, this video is basically going to help you understand different Nomad gameplay styles, while you also hopefully are able to learn how to solo the end. That's like the ultimate goal of mine. But ultimately, let's get right into it. So the first part of the video will be what I did as far as my gameplay solo as on the Pouncer spawn, and then the second video I'll show his skill cards and then his gameplay, and I'll analyze what I see. And Defensor, when slash if you see this, if my analysis of your gameplay is incorrect in any fashion, just comment below and add your thoughts. Okay, let's get right into it. So, for just a quick history lesson, um, when I did, it was formerly known as Paddock. When I did Paddock slash Nomad on the Yen, um, about a year and a half ago or so, what is it? My skill cards were as follows. It was Menace, Execution Shield, Phase, Concussive Rounds, and instead of Armored Shot, I ran. Where's that skill card at? No, I can't find it. I ran Terror. And here's the reason why I ran Terror. Terror is not affected by the short ultimate on the end. So when you run Terror, you get extended fear duration for 15 seconds. And because I run Menace as well, it allows me to put enemies in fear, or at least have the option, if the situation calls for it, put enemies in fear for 15 seconds if I want to get the enemies off of me. Something I was concerned about before is if like elite drones or scions, if they all push me, I wouldn't have fear available to get them off me. But since I ran Menace, I didn't really have to worry about it that much because I always had a juvie to execute. I always had an elite drone to stun then execute, so I didn't really worry about it. That's what makes Defensor solo so impressive, is the fact that he had his ultimate or got enough kills in certain ways to not even need Menace. Like, I definitely need a Menace. So, but long story short, as I got better with Nomad, I didn't need Terror anymore. I didn't need the 15 seconds fear. Also, because of how the fear ability works, if it's the last act of a hive, if you put enemies in fear, they just run to the LZ, which is really annoying because most of those enemies you cannot catch unless it's like a Scion, possibly a Pouncer, definitely not a Warden, definitely not a Sire. You can forget it. There's certain enemies you cannot catch when they're in fear, and it's actually kind of counterproductive to have them sprinting to the LZ for 15 seconds. Um, the end, when it comes down to Venom speed, it's fairly quick, so you can't really have, as far as the Pouncer spawn specifically, you can't have enemies like when you do call in your ultimate always running to LZ, because it's ultimately going to take longer to kill all of them because they're always running from you. Hopefully that makes sense. Because if you're not running Terror and you call in your ultimate, they're going to come out of being in fear faster, which means they're going to not be as far away on the way back. Hopefully that makes sense. So you're talking about, if you're just looking at it logically, um, if you're running terror, that enemy's running, is making like a 30-second round trip per se. But if you're not running terror, that enemy's making like a 10-second round trip. So when you need to clear a hive fast, you have to keep that in mind as well. Maybe early on when you're a Nomad player, you run terror because it does add extra help. But ultimately, running armored shot instead of terror is better. That way, you can kill enemies that you can't execute. So, let's get right into the solo. Okay, here is the solo. I use the meal skin, no real reason, just because I don't really have reasons or anything like that to use the skin. But anywho, so in this room, as you know from just playing the end at any point, you got the three blue boxes, you got the Nasher, and you got the chainsaw. As of this video, I thought it was still necessary to have a Lancer to clear the end effectively, but turns out Defensor proved that theory to be incorrect. So same rules as before. You want to get, you want to pick up the Nasher first, load up the Nasher with all the blue boxes, and then get the Lancer, and then empty your Lancer. I know people are going to say that there's no more chainsaw. They don't make you reload if you actually, let me think. When you are trying to chainsaw an enemy, like what happened before used to be, if you try to chainsaw an enemy, you had ammo. Sometimes you would accidentally reload. Allegedly, that's not a thing anymore, but I don't want to risk it, especially when it comes down to a solo. But because for some reason I'm reloading, then that's probably going to be a loss. Even on my paddock solo and onslaught when I did no speed run, I do remember reloading when I had ammo on the LZ, and I actually almost died because of it. So I don't know if they said they changed it and it's not actually happening, but it sure doesn't seem like it changed. So anyway, so here's one thing that I'm doing differently than before. So instead of just only doing the final room and waiting for enemies to come to me, what I'm currently doing right now is I'm triggering the final room. So I do want those enemies to come to me, but slightly different than before. So, and this ties into my next plan. So the reason I'm going into this room is as follows. So there's a Venom fan in that room that's going to give me, theoretically, if I were to just run past all these enemies, pull it, come back out unscathed, I'll get an extra minute of time. But in reality, you know, since there is distance between the door and the thing, I probably only net like 50 seconds of extra time or whatever. So typically, when you're trying to solo the end, unless you're doing the the despawn exploit, it's not really worth it to go in these rooms because typically how long it takes to kill all the enemies, it doesn't give you enough time to offset the time it took to kill all the enemies. But here's something special that I discovered. I mean, I didn't discover, but I already knew, but that I'm actually using to make this map easier. So if I were to play this like the Sire spawn, where I just open the last room, let all the enemies come out, and try to chainsaw all the enemies and all the grenadiers, whatever, juvies. What happens in the pouncer spawn is there's going to be too many pouncers that rush you at the same time. Like if you do that, there's like 3 or 4 pouncers that rush you at the same time. Try it and let me know how it goes. But that's what happens. And that's just far too many pouncers to deal with as Nomad at once. You would have to get the perfect cycle of fear. Hopefully you have enough juvies and elite grenadiers. And it just for me just doesn't work. But what I use, even though I've never done it for a solo, what I'm using in this video is like a hybrid despawn method. So let me explain. So the despawn method, basically you open all the rooms, spawn all the enemies, you kill one enemy in the last room or whatever, and then you go to LZ and the game's over, or something to that effect. So basically when you spawn all the enemies, you have less enemies that spawn in the final room. Basically, is the gist of it. So what I'm doing here is I'm spawning enemies in this room, not because I don't want to fight anything in the last room, but so I can have less enemies rush me at a time, if that makes sense. So because when I do clear this room or whatever, because I spawn the juvies and pouncers, I won't get the 3 or 4 pouncers that rush me in the beginning. I might get like one at a time, and it happened exactly like that. Hopefully, I explained that right. Just to reinforce it, the escape hives. I can't speak for customs, but the escape hives for TC, you can only they can only handle so many enemies at once. So let's say after the safe room for some reason you get a total of 100 enemies or something, right? Um, but TC will. This is a arbitrary number. TC can only handle 40 enemies at once. So theoretically, if you're supposed to get, if the projection for the hive, if you kill everything, is 100 enemies, let's just say for sake of argument, you're infiltrator and you cloak past the first 40 enemies, the next set of enemies won't spawn because it can only handle 40 enemies at once. Same works with this solo and other despawn solos you have come across. Like for what is it, the marksman solo that got this whole despawn thing started. You open all the rooms, you shoot a couple enemies, and you go the LZ. It allows for the weaker classes to be able to solo the end, basically, because without it, you're not going to see any striker, you're not going to see any combat medics soloing the end. So that's why the despawn method is useful. I use that here, um, or at least that idea, to spawn some of the enemies so I can get less enemies at a time in the final room. So, but yeah, that's it. We'll move on. Feel like I overstated that part, but if you have questions for the despawn or what I did here, let me know. So basically here, I'm not sure what I'm doing right now, but I can't waste a ton of time here because it's not like the fan is actually going to give me more time. So I actually have to kill these enemies as quickly as possible, but obviously safe because we're dealing with elite drones and elite grenadiers, and I'm not running Nomad armor. Not that that would save me. So I want to kill these enemies as quick as possible and then go. So right now, after I got the first set, I'm being a little bit more aggressive. And after this execution, I should have, I should have my ultimate because I use Menace. I'm not sure why I'm shooting them. That actually is a waste of ammo. I think my logic had to be at the time that shooting them was faster than executing them, and that's why I did it. But since I suck at active reloading, it cost me later, so I'll run back that little tidbit. So anyway, just look at the ammo. So see how it says 28. So I shoot twice to kill him. I don't even need to shoot twice, but I do anyway. And then because I jammed my active and then got ammo, it doesn't reload my Nasher because the game's trash. That is such a stupid thing for it to be. And I can't risk getting ammo now because there's juvies and pounces that spawn, so I just have to leave. So anyway, the fact that all the juvies are spawned and all the pouncers are spawned allows me to have less enemies to deal with. So let's revisit. Remember this last room. If there's questions about that section, timestamp it and ask me. I'll answer all questions about this solo because I did it, so I know what happened. But I may not be explaining it accurately. So again, let me know. Anyway, let's revisit this first portion. Remember, I triggered all the enemies in this area. The reason I triggered enemies in this area is because I knew that the room I just came out of, I wasn't going to net positive in terms of how long it took to hit the fan and how long it takes to kill all the enemies. So because of that, I triggered the final room. That way, there's elite grenadiers right at the door. When it comes down to enemies that'll approach you while you're in an enclosed door, obviously it's basic. Oh, sorry, it would be easier to say the enemies that don't approach you. So the enemies that don't come to you when you're behind a safe room door, sorry, not safe room door, but like a supply room door or whatever, or a closed door like this one. is basically Juvies and Sires. I could be missing one, but Juvies and Sires are the enemies that won't approach you. So when I open this door, there's no Sires in this spawn, so I'm not going to see any Juvies, but I may see some Pouncers, and or at least one Pouncer, and I know I'm definitely going to see Elite Grenadiers. So I empty my Lancer because that's just a smart habit. I get flashed through a door because TC is going to TC. So as soon as I open that door, rev my chainsaw, and then I go to work. So yeah, there's one Pouncer there. See, if I did this normally, there'd be at least three, and it's very, very tough to deal with. So I put that one in fear, and there's four Grenadiers there, which is actually good. It's a good pace, or it's good to have. And let me specify that because the end is a short map, but a lot happens, so there may be a little bit too many pauses, but it is what it is. Um, for faster Venom maps, the barracks, Ice Queen to a point, the end, obviously Venom Run, you have to be efficient with your decisions. So doing things to trigger enemies to come forward allows you to clear hives faster than if I were to have waited to trigger this room. If I would have waited to trigger this room, this solo would still not be done due to the fact that I don't know the exact time, but it would have taken too long for the Elite Grenadiers to get there. Because the spawn's off in the distance. The spawn where the Elite Grenadiers and all the enemies come out of, that not the enemies that come from the pad, but the enemies that come from that little spawn area. If you played the end, you know what I'm talking about. It's nowhere near the door that you have to open. So as far as the solo is concerned, as far as I'm concerned, what my strategy is, I need to get them as quickly as possible. That way I can clear the hive. So, um, what is it? Unfortunately, I don't have as much Nasher as I want, but that's okay. So my goal to be in this section, my goal right now is to camp this section the whole time until I need to run the DLZ basically. So remember before I triggered triggered spawn that third room, the third or four rooms in the end. So I trigger that room. There's a bunch of juvies and pouncers just walking around in there doing nothing. Because of the amount of enemies that are there, I'm not going to get overrun in this room. So what I'm going to deal with is going to be a very moderate amount of enemies at once that allows me to be methodical with my decisions. Doesn't make it like super easy by any means, but it does make it easier than if I were to do something different than what I already done in this video. So basically, the gist of it is keep the pressure off, chainsaw, watch my back because juvies like to flank for some reason, and then kill what I can kill really. So also being in that area allows the scions to come to me. Some areas of the end don't. If you're in a particular position, the scions will just be stationary. But if you're in this area, they'll kind of like rotate towards you for the most part. There are exceptions. That Scion is a strategy I also used in my other times I've soloed the end, which is 2 other times. Basically, you use your fear ability and use Nasher. If you use Voltok's a little slow, but it is doable if you don't have any Nasher bullets. But I like Nasher because it's typically 3 shots, maybe 2 with armored shots. So anyway. So basically, use execution shield, doesn't matter. So see how there's only 1 pouncer? Just need to shoot 3 times and that's it. It may only need to be twice, but I don't want a pouncer to run the LZ and gain all of its health back because there is regeneration in the end. So here you see it again, it's just 1 pouncer. So I put it in fear. If you remember the passive of Nomad, I do double the damage, and then that's it as far as that section. Elite Grenadier, it's not an elite drone, so I can just chainsaw it. It's just due to the fact that I spawned the enemies I did in room 3, I'm not dealing with a ton of enemies at once. This may not even feel like the end at first glance. It may feel like the clock. But, it's certain strategies that you have to think outside the box to do some of these solos. Elite Grenadier flank, chainsaw. So I haven't really needed to use my fear ability a ton, but if I need to, I'll be ready. I was about to get hurt, which juvies do like 98%, take off like 99% of your health, like that. So I popped my fear ability, and in the meantime, I killed the pouncer. Now there's another pouncer. Like, you see how it's just one at a time? Imagine if there were three 8 pouncers at once. It's just not all that doable. So anyway, using phase here is allowing me to, keep the pressure off, having the pouncer, run back to the LZ, because again, that's a feature in this game, but it is what it is. Elite drone coming up. We don't chainsaw elite drones because we like to win matches. So we Boltok stun. Just to be clear about that, in case for people that don't know, if you try to chainsaw an elite drone, you die on master and escape. This isn't Horde where you can get away with chainsawing an elite drone on any wave regardless. This is Escape where if you chainsaw an elite, or try to chainsaw an elite drone on master, there's like a 99% chance you'll die. There are the few chosen people that have gotten away with chainsawing elite drones, but most of us will die. So, again, something I failed to mention is when Cody did this, and also when I did this, way back when, it's basically a similar concept as Nomad because of the fear ability, the menace card, execution shield. There's so many cards that support you getting your ultimate, and the fact that the ult charge is so quick, anyway, you can kind of like completely dominate sections of escape hives, which is what you can do in solo runs. So basically, instead of just running around absent-mindedly, you just hold a section that has a reasonable cover that you can't get hit by an elite drone from a distance, and then you just chainsaw what you see. Cody did it kind of underneath the bridge or whatever in his solo. I did it kind of in the starting area, if you will. I kind of let everything come to me and I chainsawed it that way. Um, so yeah, being this class allows you to dominate sections of the map because of the constant phasing, the menace if you're running it, and obviously the fear ability. So anyway, I wasn't sure. I heard a pouncer. I don't know if you can have the volume down, but I heard a pouncer jumping from like pretty far away. So I wanted to make sure I used my fear. That way, I didn't get my stim knocked off and go down too quickly. So just being mindful. So I don't know if you're counting, but in this spawn there are 6 pouncers in total in that final act. In the other spawn, there's 3 sires. So depending on what you pick between the salvo spawn and the multrasound spawn, you're either going to get 6 pouncers in the final room, or you're going to get 3 sires. So those little differences are what makes solos harder or easier depending on what you desire and what class you're running. So knowing RNG is important as well. So I think I'm done with the pouncers. We'll see here in a second. You always gotta mind your surroundings because you never know when an enemy is going to randomly flank you. It's totally up for grabs. Unfortunately, I have 8 Nasher bullets when I should have 16, but TC's going to TC. So I believe these are the last 2 pouncers. And I can't get that one because I'm not running terror, so I have to be careful. Luckily, I had a juvie come up, so this pouncer's in phase for I think it's 12 seconds. I can't remember. So maybe that's all the pouncers. I realized, and this is also situational real awareness. I knew when I wasn't going to get any Nasher ammo because I jammed my reload, that there was going to come a time where I was going to have to take advantage of the opportunity to pick up an Elite Grenadier's overkill. And I remembered I chainsawed an Elite Grenadier, so when I had the opportune time, I used it. That way I can use all that ammo and come back to my Nasher. So when you're doing these solo runs, it's always good to be mindful of what your plan is. So the strategy essentially is playing your attack, and then try to see if your strategy works. If it doesn't work, think of why you lost and do something different. Now, if you just lose because of a game mechanic or like your flashbang's not working, that doesn't, you don't need a strategy change in that context. But if you lose because, you know, the venom's too fast or there's too many enemies in one section, you have to consider like, is this solo possible? Or do I need to do a different class? Or is there another mode of attack I need to go about this? So anyway, it's just constantly evolving and thinking about why you're winning and why you're losing, and that's how you'll get something like this done. So I can't remember what's remaining. I know there's definitely elite drones. So I got an unfortunate in the end, and this is a lot of pauses. I know, I apologize, but there's a lot to say. In the end, elite drones like to Kobe shocks, and you have no idea where they're Kobeing their shocks from. It's very, very frustrating because if it touches you, you're like instantly down, almost regardless of class. So you have to just completely dodge it. They also, you know, sometimes they'll say throwing shock, and you already see the shock in midair. That's what just happened. So the audio said throwing shock, and the shock was already like 2 inches from my face. So just be mindful when you're trying to solo the end as Nomad or any class that they know where you're at. So it is unlikely that they're not going to Kobe a shot cross map and try to down you. So keep that in mind. So I got a little lucky there and I juked it. And since they're elite drones and I had flashes from elite grenadiers, which in the elite grenadier spawn, pretty much regardless of class, it's always good to have flashes. I decided to use those flashes. And I actually had a very interesting idea because I did realize that there was two lead drones here. So at the moment of the flash, I noticed that there's two lead drones here. What happens with elite drones? Elite drones are probably, in terms of running away from Nomad and Fear, the only thing faster. Well, there's a couple enemies faster: Warden, Juvie, Sire. I would say Warden, Juvie, Sire, and then Elite Drone is probably the fourth fastest enemy in terms of running away from Fear. So when I flashed these Elite Drones, I knew that the one I didn't execute is gone. I knew that. So what I thought is, since I had two flashes, I am going to tag the other one. That's all I knew at the time. I didn't also know at the time that there'd be salvo sounds there, but that's beside the point. But I knew I wanted to tag and down him. That way I had him on the ground to get another execution. So you'll see that all play out here. So here's the execution. Tag. See how he jukes, or side rolls, I should say. So he's down. And fortunately for me, he stuns his teammate. And he's on the ground. So that whole dynamic worked really, really well. It's done more than I anticipated. I didn't expect the salvo silence to be there. But yeah, the whole dynamic really worked in my favor. So I'll run that back in case you guys missed it. A little bit more. So basically, I hear throwing shock right about. Let me see. Right there. You see how you see it? Yeah. You see that? It basically hits me in the face and then I hear it. Roughly. Anyway, execute. Then I tag the elite drone. One goes down. One gets stunned. Another salvo sounds there. He shoots in fear because salvo sounds are stupid and OP. I chainsaw the elite drone. I don't know what else is in fear. I think about salvoing just in case there's a scion that's facing away from me and I can salvo it. But they were running towards the LZ, so they weren't there. So picking up the salvo ends up being a very short process. So, as I've talked about in other videos, if you're going to solo maps and you're kind of like pressed for time in terms of Venom, because of Venom speed, or obviously because of Venom speed, because what else? But because of Venom speed, it is to your advantage to know how long an act is going to take. Off memory, I know for the end that the doors close at 4:40 plus whatever fans you pull. So if you remember in the game, I pulled 2 fans. So these doors are going to close at 6:40. So I still have some time to kill all these enemies, but I have to be in a position to kill all these enemies. So I have to keep that in mind as well. Um, Same logic can be used for a lot of maps. I used it on the Split. I used it on Ice Queen a few times. That way I know to be in a certain position before running to the LZ. I've definitely used it on the line for virtually all of my solo runs on the line. Well, the ones with the weaker classes. So knowing that information can only help you. So knowing how long an act's supposed to take, if you're doing solo runs, can be to your advantage. So for the end, I definitely know that one because it's a small number and it's easy to remember. Some of them are like 6:17, so I think Ice Queen something like that. But anyway, moving on. The remaining part of this hive is just elite drones and salvo scions. I've only killed one elite drone, or sorry, I've only killed one salvo scion. So I have two choices here with the limited ammo. I just dodge them by, certain movements or running or taking the long way to the LZ, which you'll see here in a second, or I just straight up kill them. It just depends on the venom, when it negatively affects me, and because I put those salvo scions in fear, how quickly are they going to get back to me? These are things I have to think about on the fly. So let's see how it manifests. So we got who knows how many elite drones. Too many. So chainsaw that guy, execute, and there's one right next to him. So as you can see, he's going to bolt, and because I know he's going to bolt, I shoot him with the overkill, which ended up being to my advantage. And this is where I pick up the Nasher. Only 2 bullets. Again, it should be, 10 bullets, but I digress. Okay, that salvo sounds there. I don't have my fear ability, so this is not a good position to be in. I don't have something to chainsaw. I don't have a flashbang. This is actually a really, really bad position to be in. But because I've killed enough enemies, and basically, I basically resort to my original strategy. So for me, it's like I have 2 choices. I can kill all the enemies in this part of the hive and just, walk out normally. Or if I don't have time, I take the scenic route and go all the way around, which you'll see right here. So again, I have no fear. I have nothing to leverage phase off of. So I have to take the scenic route, which you'll see here in a second. So salvo scion, shooting a wall just because. And then I realized that there's no juvies coming, so I have to do this. And the only reason I'm able to take this scenic route is because I have stem. Also, in the end, sometimes you get the salvo scion glitch there. They typically don't shoot, and that's it. So you're able to just, I would say 9 times out of 10, just run by them, regardless if it's salvo or mulcher. If you're Blade Master and you melee, sometimes it'll swing back, but it's very, very rare. It's just a glitch position on the map that sometimes happens, and it basically takes a scion almost completely out of the game. So it's basically like you killed a scion. So, anyway. So, just to be clear, if you saw my channel trailer, I did virtually the exact same thing here. However, the very, very key difference is I'm not running terror. For this section specifically, where I run and then pop fear, it's actually to my benefit to have terror. That way, I have more time to kind of like gather myself to execute enemies that are in fear. In this context, I have to be basically perfect in terms of my Boltok stuns, who's in fear, my executions, and whatever. So you'll see that here in a second. So anyway, I put my fear ability on, or I use my ultimate, I should say. I execute this guy. So everything's kind of got to work perfectly here. The elite drones have to be perfectly spaced. And see how he wasn't? See how almost, I don't want to say he got screwed over there, but a way I almost lost because remember, I'm not running terror, so it's like 5 seconds and it's over. And he was just out of my phase range, which I think is 10 meters. So because of that, he's not in fear. So this elite drone, if I don't hit him on the very first Boltox stun, the game ends immediately. Because it's unlikely in that context I'm going to be able to triple combo an elite drone, especially when there's other elite drones around. So let me run that back a little bit. So take cover because I did take a lot of damage. Put this elite drone in fear at minimum. Execute. Then I put this elite drone in fear. And then that one's in fear, so he's just going to hop back. I have to get it on the first try, the Boltox stun. And I luckily do. And that elite drone goes all the way to the pad because of phase, not my ultimate. So I Boltox on him there. And remember, I told you the doors close at 440 plus fans. I pulled 2 fans. It is now 6:48. The doors are definitely closing. So the LZ spawn for the salvo spawn or pouncer spawn, however you want to look at it, is 1 sire, I want to say 20 juvies, and a salvo scion. If you get the mulcher scion spawn, you get 3 grenadiers, a bunch of juvies, and 1 mulcher. I couldn't tell you what would be easier or what would be harder, but I think almost regardless, as Nomad, I think they're about equal. But obviously, overall, the sire spawn would be better for Nomad because there's less to it. He just deals with 1 room. So anyway, moving on. So anyway, see how the sire is right there, and there's still a scion I didn't kill, and then the new salvo scion spawns. So all I need to do is chainsaw juvies, which is really no problem. But at the same time, I need to be, on one hand, I need to be lucky because the salvo scion did just make the pad. And I don't know if you saw it, I may put a link in the description, but my very first Fear or Nah video is a Mulcher Scion destroying me on the pad. So because of that video, I was very, very nervous about this Scion being on the pad. But when I realized that he was in fear, like actually in fear, not just purple and shooting at me, he was actually in fear. Even though I had all these juvies around me, I knew I had to take him out quick before the game tried to cheat me. So anyway, once I noticed he was in fear, I rush him and try to shoot him with Boltok and Nasher. So I ignore the juvies. I look like there's a fear now with one of the juvies. I think one of them just lunged at me. So anyway, I use Nasher, and then I just completely take him out. And it's basically game over at this point. You're not going to lose. I don't care if it's 100 juvies. Nomad is not going to lose this situation. It's just the fear is too strong. The class is too strong. And that's pretty much it, guys. This is my rendition of Nomad on the end Pouncer spawn. What I'll go over next will be Defensor's rendition of the exact same class and map. And you'll see things that I like to say he improved from what I did in this solo. Thanks for watching this. Stay tuned for the next part. Alright everyone, this is the next part of the video. We're going to go over Defensor skill cards. There's only one key difference between my stack and his stack. So the same things that I had on were Armored Shot, Execution Shield, Phase, and Concussive Rounds. Instead of Menace, he has Consecutive Shot. If you've seen Defensor solo runs and whatnot, you have seen him be extremely extremely accurate with the M-barred sniper rifle. So the fact that he's going to get more headshot damage because he is that accurate could only help serve his cause. Now, if someone showed me that they were using consecutive shot on the end, I personally would be confused. But, that's why Defensor, when he chose to go without a Lancer, he is really, truly thinking outside the box. If you were to have, load up a random lobby, I know it's not the best example, but it's an example that I have to work with. If you load up a random lobby like 100 times and let's say someone was Nomad every single time, you would have 100 straight people using the Lancer and executing, which, theoretically is typically correct. But if you're someone like Defensor, well, Defensor, there's only Defensor that's like Defensor, and you want a challenge where you're not using Lancer on the end, you have to kind of think outside of the box in your approach. So consecutive shot at closer inspection is not as confusing as I initially thought, due to the fact he can deal with scions quickly or quicker than how I dealt with scions, which is barely at all to begin with. So anyway, so the main difference between the skill cards and my skill cards is consecutive shot instead of menace. Also, without having menace, you're going to get your alt from damage, bleeding just general damage, one, and bleeding enemies with armored shots. So we'll see if he's in any precarious situations because of not having his ultimate, or maybe it's inconsequential and it doesn't even matter. So let's get into the solo. Okay, here's Defensor. No idea why he's using Cosmonaut, but we'll forgive him for it. So no Lancer, Nomad, the end. No despawn. Keep that in mind. Um, so in this, uh, so currently, what his plan is basically pull the fan and then go to that room that I went to. So I don't know if he had the exact same logic I did. He'll have to comment below because I didn't ask him. I just told him I was doing this. Um, but my logic for opening up that room is kind of like a hybrid no despawn. I didn't want to deal with the influx of enemies that would have came if I didn't spawn those enemies. So I decided to spawn those enemies, so I dealt with less enemies in the last room. I don't know. Well, excuse me, I do know. The reason he has to go to this room is because he's running consecutive shot, which will help with bolt talk and which will also help with the sniper that you can get in that room. The sniper intuitively will help with headshotting the scions. And if you're really, really good, which he may have done in this video, I don't remember, you can headshot a pouncer. And also keep in mind with consecutive shot, if you're headshotting juvies and then you go back and headshot on a scion, you might be able to get it in one shot. It just depends on how it stacks. So anyway, name of the game here is do your very best to safely execute the elite grenadiers and elite drones in this room. So again, consecutive shot also works with bolt talk, so he's going to get some serious damage from bolt talk as well. And remember, he's not using Lancer, so he has to pick, and obviously long shot and then one other gun to work with during this solo. And hopefully that gun's enough because from a Nomad perspective, nothing is better than Lancer, so it puts in perspective how hard this solo truly is. So what he does right here is he gets the long shot and gets as much ammo as he can. And then once he crosses, I forget which tile it is. Once he crosses, I think this tile, that's when the juvie spawn. And he doesn't have fear to get out of the situation. So for me, my insurance was if the pouncers rushed me, I had my fear ability. But it looked like one wasn't playing and then one jumped up. So that worked out in his favor for sure. I'm not sure exactly what happened there. So basically, he has, 4 long shot, 14 overkill. It's a pretty decent position. Now, remember earlier, he didn't get any of the blue boxes because he didn't have long shot, so, why bother? But now that he has it, he can get this blue box, which I think is retardedly, well, actually, no, I can't say that, is stupidly placed, really. I don't know why they have it set up that way. But anyway, it's very, very annoying where the blue boxes are placed in the end. Because there's some times where I can't even find like a Nasher, the ammo's easy to find, but sometimes you can't find, it takes like a while to find the ammo. But anyway, I'm ranting about something that doesn't matter. So there's already some very, very important differences between what he did and what I did. What I did is I picked up the Nasher, loaded up the blue boxes, got the Lancer, went to that first room, killed everything in that room, pulled the fan just to offset some of the time for killing everything in that room, spawned the enemies, and left. But keep in mind, before I even went to that third room, I spawned the enemies in this act. Now, Defensor can't spawn the enemies in this act because there is almost no legitimate way he can efficiently kill 4 Grenadiers from the perspective of a Lancerless Nomad. So because he doesn't have Lancer, he really can't do what I did. He has to do a little bit differently. Now maybe he can have Flash or whatever, but he really can't do it the way I did because it's going to set a chain of events that doesn't work in his favor. Also, if he were to open this door and spawn the enemies, the shields of the Scions more likely than not will come up. And since he's not Foz, he can't headshot and Scion through his shield, which honestly, if the shield came up too quickly, might result in a restart. So there's a little bit of differences, weapon choices, order of events. The fact that he had to go all the way back for ammo is also important because that means he has to be that much more efficient in this act. Those little things, add up as far as like time spent. So this first part, in terms of killing the elite drones and then obviously Scions, if you've seen the solo, has to be very, very efficient. That way the Venom's not up on top of him. You have to keep in mind when I did my solo, the Venom was like right on top of me and I didn't even kill everything. So, and that was quote unquote, a more efficient approach before starting in this room. I would probably guesstimate he's about 30 seconds behind what I did, but it really just depends on how efficiently he kills the Scions with what he has. So we'll see how it manifests. So he kills an elite drone. So keep in mind it's consecutive shot. So it's all about the critical hit. So you see that first damage. So he just two-shotted a Scion, easy. So there's only 4 Scions, before the final one spawns. So he just has to quickly kill this next one, and it justifies everything he's done. And that's the important part when you go to one of these rooms. When you go to one of these rooms, you have to have like a justification, almost like a proof that what you did was the right thing. So for Defensor, his proof per se, if we were like in school or like in some math class, his proof would be like, okay, I spent time getting the long shot. I quote unquote wasted time going all the way back to the pod to get ammo. But what justifies my actions is if I knock out these Scions almost instantly, because that's the only way. That's the only way to justify it. If he doesn't kill both, and I mean both Scions, if he doesn't kill both Scions, everything he did is kind of, I don't want to say a complete waste of time, but not optimal. But what makes it optimal is the fact that he is efficient with killing these first 2 Scions, which is not easy to do unless you're a melee character. So he almost goes down here, but he rolls a dice, headshots an elite drone. So remember, double damage and fear should stack with consecutive shot. That's why it was almost a one shot, and he just blasts a salvo sign. Now he's mid map because he's killed, a couple elite drones and the 2 salvo signs that are in the, that spawn in the final act. So as you can see here, he's almost one-shotting Juvies. So if remember, that also stacks if he wants it to, or if he's able to take advantage of it. So anyway, he gets Kobe'd a few times, it looks like, with the flashes, and he just needs to avoid getting hit by a Pouncer and ideally execute. Let me rephrase. Avoid getting hit by a Pouncer because I don't know if the Pouncer can necessarily one hit down you with its quills or not, but it's a lot of damage it takes. Even if you have stem, you get hit in such a way to where it doesn't just knock off your stem, but it makes you a little bit red after. So the Pouncers, even if you have Nomad armor, are a problem as Nomads, especially without the Lancer. So with the Elite Grenadiers, since he doesn't have flashes, at least I don't believe he does. He might. I could be wrong. If he does have flashes, he can flash then execute. He has the option of triple comboing, which is not practical when there's three elite grenadiers. Maybe if there was one. Um, and he also has the option of Boltok sending. So even without the Lancer, there are still options to progress via executions. So he has to fall back because again, he can't just chainsaw. So he's only getting his ultimate through general damage. Remember, he's not going to get his ultimate at all um, through the fear. Sorry, through executions because he's not running menace. So that is here's something that and it's a nitpick, but I have to mention this. So Defensor obviously knows this because you've seen his solos, but that this spam he does on the Pouncer, because of how the overkill is, you run the risk of not killing that Pouncer. If he shoots it how he normally shoots it, I don't know how to say it, but you know what it looks like. Where it's like controlled shots, he probably would the Pouncer probably already been dead. So there's actually another time earlier on where Pouncer completely gets away, and because his regeneration on the end, um, it gets all of its health back, so you just wasted the ammo. So this Pouncer might die because he might shoot it again, but just keep in mind those basics. Don't even if you're under pressure of a solo or even like a very tough three-person game that's tough for your friends or whatever. Keep the basics in mind. Don't just abandon what you definitely know. So yeah, he had to shoot it again, and that's another little tidbit um, that I want to mention is when I did my solo, I used Nasher to kill stuff. Um, you would think it wouldn't matter, but when it comes down to Nomad's fear ability in conjunction with shooting a shotgun at fleeing sires or pouncers or scions, I just have a better for some reason I'm just able to kill them better as with the Nasher than the overkill. I don't think that should be the case, but I have better results with the Nasher. Intuitively, he can't necessarily do that. Um, he can't necessarily use the overkill because he wants to restock the overkill. But honestly, I probably would have loaded up the Nasher or at least picked it up in the beginning instead of the overkill. I don't know if that's a flaw necessarily because I want to say you get more ammo and I want to say you get more powerful, stronger shots if you would have used Nasher long shot or overkill long shot. I have to ask a couple of my buddies that know damage stuff to be sure, but I just have better results with the Nasher than overkill in terms of a nomad context. But obviously, if you complete the solo, it almost doesn't really matter what you do. But I'm just thinking of like ways to improve for the next person that does this. So, um, Elite Grenadier coming, Boltok's done. So he doesn't get sometimes he can get stoned with his helmet on. You just have to be mindful of what his movements are. But sometimes you have to knock the helmet off. It just depends. So anyway, so he has to use Boltok ammo in a situation where he would otherwise probably just chainsaw. At least that's what I did. So that's a part of the challenge, not using the Lancer. So it is what it is. So double the damage and fear. So he almost one melee downs the Juvie. So he just has to wait. See, that's how you shoot the overkill. You just have to keep up with the basics, especially in solo runs. And this is coming from a guy that didn't really active his shots until like Op 5. Well, maybe Op 4, I don't know. But anyway, so see that's the side the Pouncer I'm talking about. The Pouncer gets away and it's going to get all of its health back. So when it comes down to Nomad on the end, he is he's kind of choosing what I chose on my very first run, which is kind of like waiting in the main area or like the initial area and then let enemies come to you. And I feel like that's the best approach without a Lancer because you're not as dominant. See, in this current context, he's at the mercy of Bull Talk, Flashbangs, and hopefully the Overkill kills the Pouncer in time. Um, so yes, so he needs so being in the area he is in actually leads to a better escape route to where he can fall back easier. If he was in the same area I was in, he would have already lost because he can't chainsaw every juvie or whatever that comes. Not to mention elite drones might push. There'd be too much to deal with in that context. It's easier to deal with in this current state because there's better cover when Nomad without a Lancer is essentially a weaker character. There's better cover to protect himself from like a Pouncer or Elite Grenadier. So there's different ways to clear this hive. Evidently, it's been done 5 times now. Nomad on the end, at least legitimately. So just when you see all those times, there's going to be different positions that every Nomad class takes. And you just kind of have to find what works for you. Maybe you want to go to where you can fall back to the pod area if necessary. Not necessarily always the pod, but that direction. That's what I did on the first one. Or maybe you're like Cody and you're mid map and you're chainsawing under the bridge and you're just fearing everything that way. You just have to find a style that works for you. And that's basically my story. Anyway, so it's actually when it comes down to Nomad on the end, it's actually kind of like even as I watch it right now, it's actually hard to believe this was actually doable. So I do think he would have had an easier time. I don't have the guts to try this, but I do think he would have had an easier time with the Nasher. That's just my gut feeling. Um, but anywho, anyway, so he has to be, Jewies are typically, irrelevant as Nomad, but without a Lancer, it's a problem. But that's, again, part of the challenge. So he's going to put both these guys in fear, and he's going to pick up the Claw because he ran out of long shot. He's not running Terror, so he has to make light work of this Pouncer, or it's going to gain all of its health back. So they'll run away for 5 seconds, and they're going to turn right back. So, consecutive shot. So, when you're good at getting headshots, consecutive shots can be very, very useful. The Pouncer ran into that area. He almost one-shot headshot with a Boltok there. I don't know if you guys saw that. But that's all because of consecutive shot. So, okay. I thought he trapped that Pouncer. That's weird. Let me run that back. So, when it comes down to... And I've done this before. So there's not one way to do any of these maps. There's multiple ways, even if you pick the same class as somebody else. So something I've done in the past is I would like lock Pouncers in here, lock Scions in here, and that's because ultimately it's the same. Not only is it the same as killing them, it's actually better than killing them because you don't have to use any ammo if you're a class that needs the ammo. So I think that's what he tried to do there, but the Pouncer, pounced out. So again, we'll run it back. Consecutive shot right here. Okay, and then the Pouncer's going to jump in. I don't even know where it went. He has to take care of this lead drone before he pulls the door closed. Not running Menace, so he's not getting all charged. And then he closes the door, and somehow, some way, that Pouncer gets there. Absolutely incredible. I'd be mad. But, like a professional, he kills it, and that's it. I don't know how many Pouncers are left, but there's probably a decent amount. So keep in mind, and this all goes back to the early justification. Defensor killed a decent amount of elite drones early, and he killed 2 whole Scions. So when he gets the 2 Scions from the pad, it's not even a problem because it's not 4 Scions, which is typically what one would deal with in a situation. It's just the 2. So he can isolate them both, kill them at the same time, put them in fear at the same time. It just depends on how they spaced when they spawned. So he doesn't have a ton of claw, but this is the only way to keep the armored shot going and also consecutive shots using claw. So the Scion's behind him. He's again not running terror, so um, the Scion goes in fear for 5 seconds and then he's out of it. So something you cannot do as any class in the end. You can't just casually walk up here. So this is what I'm talking about. You can't this worked out for him, but you can't do this. You can't just walk up here. There's unless you kill the 5 elite drones or 4. It's anywhere between 3 and 5 elite drones, depending on how many you killed during the act. If you're Lonnie, you need to rush up there and get ready to melee something. If you're Nomad, you need to rush up there and get ready to Boltox something. When he was holding a Lancer, if the elite drones were facing them, he'd be dead. But it worked out that a lot of them weren't facing them, and he had time to not only drop the salvo, he had time to reload his Boltog, which I guess he didn't reload from earlier. So just keep that in mind for when you do the Nomad solos. You want to be ready to stun an elite drone or flash an elite drone as soon as you come up those stairs, because they're going to be waiting for you. More times than not, I'm actually surprised you got away with this. More times than not, they will face you and immediately start shooting. So sometimes when it comes down to these solos, it's better be lucky than good. So it worked out there, and he got an execution, so he will definitely survive this situation. Triple combo not working because TC is going to TC. Execute, get claw ammo, because that's his only option as far as armored shot. And he has to find a nice way to kill the Salvo Scion. He'd probably kill him right there, but he's shielded, so anyway. Long distance Boltox stun. Execute, easy. Again, no menace, so he can't just like rush the Salvo Scion because of the fact that, he doesn't have his ultimate. He will get some ult charge from just waiting around, and he will get some ult charge from the fact that he just threw that shock. So, anyway, he's going to try to shoot the toes of the Salvo Scion, and it'll enable him to get his ultimate just in time to use the ultimate on the Salvo Scion, and then get double the damage and also grab the salvo after he kills this Scion. So what's nice about the ultimate for Nomad is you can use your ultimate to charge your next one. Let me explain. So he uses ultimate, put the Salvo Scion in fear, but now that the armor shot is causing the Scion to bleed, he's already got some of his ult bet. So I find that, kind of nice because you do get the double damage, which will ultimately accelerate that ult charge. So anyway, remember from before, 440 if you pull no fans, Defensor pull 2 fans at a minute apiece, doors already closing. Salvo Scion is the only thing he has to be wary of. In this context, I don't think you can let the Salvo Scion outside. You have to find a way to keep him inside in some fashion, or just be lucky he doesn't make it out. Whatever works, really. So he has stem, so he's still able to bleed this Juvie. So as long as he keeps his distance, he'll be able to bleed him. And the fear ability was very, very clutch there. He's totally out of ammo, but he has time to kill these enemies real quick. And then that's it. Salvo Scion did not make the pad, and we'll take a win anywhere we get it. So let's recap both solos before we wrap up here. So I use, for the most important thing here to take away here is I used the superior skin. I used Emil and he used Cosmonaut, so that's the most important thing. No, but all seriousness, so we'll recap my solo, and then we'll recap his. So what I did, so spawned, I got Nasher and picked up all the blue boxes, right? So I did that, and then I picked up the Lancer. So opened the door, pulled the fan, I triggered the last section because I wanted to spawn the Elite Grenadiers to make my overall time on the map more efficient. I figured if enemies were coming concurrently with me dealing with that third room, that's a good use of time. Okay. So I go to that third section, execute the enemies in there. I jam my reload, which actually costs me about 8 bullets in my Nasher, which is frustrating, but we're able to still get through it. I spawn the pouncers and juvies in that room, and then I come out and shut the door. So because I use that room to spawn all the enemies, I won't have to deal with um, as many enemies rushing me at once in the final room. Okay, I go back to that final room. I deal with a bunch of Elite Grenadiers right off the bat, so my plan works perfectly. Chainsaw them, kill a Pouncer there, here and there, and then I get to that section on the far, left, and then I just use that section to constantly leverage fear. And if a Pouncer's in fear, I shoot three Nasher shots at it, and then when I lose my stem, I chainsaw something. If I get full red, I back up away from a juvie, and I'm constantly cycling fear to the point where I'm dealing with salvo sound in an inopportune situation because any I don't have ultimate and I don't have anything to execute. So I take the scenic route around, um, lose my stem, almost die in the venom, call my ultimate, execute an elite drone, execute another elite drone, Bolt Hawk stun elite drone at the pad. And then since the doors, it was like 6:48, I want to say, so the doors have been closing for about 8 seconds, and I was just able to chainsaw my way out of the situation. Due to my very first Fear or Nah video, once the salvo sound made the pad, called him out. Well, no, I didn't call him out, but I made sure to kill him before I killed any more juvies because I could deal with all the juvies at any time. So I got to the salvo scion, shot him a couple times, called him my ult, shot him again, killed the scion, and then chainsaw all the juvies. So that's in word form what I did in my solo as Nomad. So pretty. I don't want to say it's necessarily straightforward, but it's a solo that's definitely duplicatable. Very, very. I would say of the two solos on the Pouncer spawn, I think mine is easier to repeat than his is, because you have to be better to do his than mine. It's not hard to chainsaw. But it is hard to, not run Menace and not chainsaw, if that makes sense. So, all right, so let's recap Defensor solo. And I'm going to do this as best as possible because, again, I didn't do it, but I did watch it a few times. So, Defensor, he spawns. He doesn't get any of the ammo because he wants to get long shot and overkill in that first room. That's the strategy. In hindsight, I think again he'd be better off getting the Nasher, but there's really no way of telling because this is the first time. This is the first time it's ever been done this way. So there's really no telling what would be better. That's just a gut feeling from some experience. So goes to that first room, execute the enemies. He gets the overkill and he gets the long shot. Loads up. I said first room. He goes to that third room. Let me repeat myself. He goes to that third room. After pulling the fan, executes all the enemies in there, gets an overkill from Elite Grenadier and gets a long shot, uses the ammo in that room to load up both guns, leaves the room, shuts the door. Again, I don't know if he was thinking the exact same thing. I don't know if he knew what I knew. I would assume he did in terms of like the despawn, where if you spawn those enemies, you'll get rushed. The last act is more bearable because less enemies will rush you at once. They kind of pace itself. I'm almost positive he knows that, but anyway. So he shuts the third room door. He goes all the way back to the pod because he never got any of the blue boxes. He's going to use those blue boxes to load his sniper and overkill. And he doesn't spawn, and he goes all the way back to the final room. He doesn't spawn the final room like I did. Um, his efficiency in that final room was taking out the salvo scions as quickly as possible. He does that. He stacks his consecutive shot by shooting a lead drone first, and then sniping a salvo scion, killing it, and then he uses a fear ability. Well, excuse me. After killing the first salvo scion, he kills the second one. Uses fear ability to kill um, the next salvo scion, and then after that, it's just a matter of charging your ult with overkill damage and sniper damage and bolt talk damage, and somehow surviving not having menace and not having fear as often as I would have it since I run menace. Um, Using overkill to kill pouncers as they come, controlling the position you decide that he decided is ultimately what he did. Overkill for pouncers, Boltok stun. I don't think he used flashbangs for Elite Grenadiers, but Boltok stun for Elite Grenadiers, and that's what he cycled, and also Boltok stun for Elite drones. So a little bit different, and basically the behavior of his play is dictated by which enemies rush him, because you really don't 100% know how you're going to get pushed on the end, but you have a general idea, and it's different every time. So after he dealt with his general cycle of fear, as far as like killing pouncers with overkill, using fear to get out of situations, he eventually picked up a claw as well when he ran out of a long shot. He's dealing with 2 scions and 3 to 4 lead drones remaining. Uh, what he does for one of the scions, he calls in his ultimate, use consecutive shot combined with armor shot to kill that scion while it's in fear, so he's getting the extra damage. He's not running terror, so that other scion comes up behind him because that other scion theoretically is rushing the LZ, or rushing out of the hive, however you want to look at it. He's not in his fear. He's not in fear anymore, and he's ready to shoot Defensor, and he goes up the stairs holding a salvo, which is risky since there's all the elite drones there. But since none of them are facing him, he's able to execute them all. And then when a salvo scion walks up behind him, he throws a shock to charge his ultimate. He shoots the foot of the scion and also charges ultimate. And ultimately, when he finally gets his ultimate, he calls it and shoots the scion in the back, and then that scion dies. Doors are closed, and I think he's ready at about 6:41. The doors are closing, and I'm not 100% sure what would have happened if the salvo scion made the pad. I'll have to ask Defensor. I don't want to make any judgments either direction because again, I've not done the solo this way, so I really don't have I don't think I would have been able to do it if the salvo scion, all things being equal, made the pad, especially without terror. Maybe, but anyway, I'll get his feedback in the comment section hopefully. So where was I? So he killed the salvo scion, picks up the salvo, enemy spawn because it's now 6:41. He salvos the sire, and then he rushes all the way at the end of the pad. And since he has armored shot with no lancer, he just has to shoot the juvies with the claw ammo that he collected through the dead elite drone. So he shoots a couple of juvies here and there, gets his ultimate, shoots them, melees them. Salvo Sign doesn't make the pad, and that's game. So that is it for my analysis on Paddock. Sorry, not Paddock. Nomad on the end with Pouncer Spawn. Much, much harder than Sire Spawn that I did some time ago. Twice some time ago. So anyways, I'll click some relevant links, the original videos, and hopefully Defensor sees this in time. So anyway, that is it, guys. As usual, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching, guys. You guys have a good one. Peace.